sorry for it being so late. The rain, oh my god. I saw your text and I came right over, but I did not expect this much rain. Like, my hair, can you tell? It's completely drenched. Luckily I had a coat, but why does a raincoat not have a hood? Like, explain that to me. Riddle me that. It's raining literal cats and dogs out there, right? Not gonna lie, it was a little bit scary getting here, so do you mind if I sleep over? Thank you. I also really wanted to see you. So now we can have a cozy sleepover. That's awesome. Your day was stressful? Okay. Tell me about it. What happened? Okay. Yeah. I hear ya. It's tough sometimes. But I'm sure tomorrow is gonna be a better day. And I mean, we can't control today, we can't control tomorrow, but we control right now. We can't control right now, we can't control right now, we can't control right now. So I would say, let's forget about this day. Let's ignore the raging storm outside that I just ran through. And let's get comfy. It's already so nice and dark and cozy here. I like this. It's cool. And I would say, you know what I'm gonna say. You know, right? You know what's my proposal gonna be. Yes, let's read. Let's read Harry Potter. We ended on such a exciting chapter last time. We just have to keep going, right? I agree. I'm happy that we're of the same opinion. I brought the book. I had it in my bag, luckily, so it survived the rain. I was really afraid that it was gonna get soaked and we couldn't keep reading our story. But luckily, that didn't happen. So we can read Harry Potter, and the Philosopher's Stone. And I think we're now in chapter 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are you excited? Let me check what this chapter is called, okay? Okay, let me check. Okay, this chapter is called Diagon Alley. It's called Diagon Alley. Oh my god. This is gonna be good. Okay, honestly, I can't wait, so let's jump right in. And get comfy. Yeah, grab that blanket there. Yes, snuggle up. And sorry for my hair. I feel like I have a mop on my head, but we're just gonna roll with it, okay? Okay, are you ready? Okay, let's read. Chapter 5. Diagon Alley. Harry woke up early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid came to tell me I was going to a school for wizards. When I opened my eyes, I'll be at home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise. And there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door. Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. All right, Harry mumbled. I'm getting up. He sat up, and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside of him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that. Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl. Pay him, Hagrid grunted into the sofa. What? He wants paying for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbugs, tea bags, and finally Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 nuts, said Hagrid sleepily. Nuts? The little bronze ones. Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins, and the owl held out its leg so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew off through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly, sat up, and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy all your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid. Said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boots. I haven't got any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Don't worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if their house was destroyed, they didn't keep their gold in their house, boy. Nah, first stop for us is Gringotts. Gringotts, yay. Wizard's Bank. Have a sausage, they're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of your birthday cake neither. Wizards have banks? Just the one. Gringotts, run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah, so you'd be mad to try and rob it. I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe. Except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gotta visit Gringotts anyway, for Dumbledore. Hogwarts business. Hagrid drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. Knows he can trust me, see? Got everything? Come on then. Harry followed Hagrid out on the rock. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking around for another boat. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but we'll go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now I've got ya. They've settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems a shame to row, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another of his sideways looks. If I was to, speed things up a bit, would you mind not mention it at Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see some more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. Why would you be mad to try and rob goblins? Rob Gringotts? Harry asked. Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's dragons guarding the high security vaults, and then you gotta find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you didn't manage to get your hands on summon. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry learned from Uncle Vernon that people liked to be left alone while they did this. But it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in his life. Ministry of Magic messing things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. Like us, we're also turning the page. Magical. There's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked, before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore for minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts. So old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Bungler, if there ever was one. So he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning, asking for advice. But what does the Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is to keep it from the muggles that there's still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why? Blimey, Harry, everyone be wanting magic solutions to their problems. Nah, we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat gently bumped into the harbour wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper, and they clambered up the stone steps on the street. Passer-by stared a lot at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as someone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things, like parking meters, and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? Things these muggles dream up, eh?" "Hagrid," said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. "Did you say there are dragons at Gringotts?" "Well, so they say," said Hagrid. "Crikey, I'd like a dragon." "You'd like one?" Foreshadowing. Sorry for the spoiler. "Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go." They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so that he could buy the tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. "Still got your letter, Harry?" he asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. "Good," said Hagrid. "There's a list of everything you need." Harry unfolded a second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." And then I'll show you so you can see. There's basically a list of everything he needs written out so that Harry can shop for it. That's very practical. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require: first, 3 sets of plain work robes in black. Second, 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. Third, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragonhide or similar. And fourth, 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following: The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic, by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory, by Adalbert Waffling. I love these names. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, by Fidelia Spore. Magical Drafts and Potions, by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, by Quentin Trimble. And next, other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2, 1 set of glass or crystal phials, 1 telescope, and 1 set brass scales. Students may also bring an owl, a cat, or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. "Can we buy all this in London?" Harry wondered aloud. "If you know where to go," said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before, although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going. He was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains too slow. "I don't know how the muggles manage without magic," he said as they climbed the broken-down escalator which led up to a bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be the same huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry had known that the Dursleys had no sense of humor, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help but trust him. "This is it," said Hagrid, coming to a halt. "The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place." It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big book shop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual Hagrid." "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hands on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. Can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter, what an honor." He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter. Can't believe I'm meeting you at last." "So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all aflutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers," cried Daedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry's Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you need it, Potter." He laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." I hope I'm not being offensive. I'm just reading what it says in the book. Look. Can you see here? They always write it with the extra letters. So just want to read it authentically. Nothing wrong with stuttering. He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from everyone. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on. Lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time. and Hagrid led them through the bar and out in a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told ya, didn't I? Told you he was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet ya. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subjects. Now, where's my umbrella?" Vampires. Hags. Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, he muttered. "Right, stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered. It wriggled. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing an archway large enough even for Hagrid, an archway on a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into a solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, said a sign hanging over them. "Yeah, you'll be needing one," said Hagrid, "but we gotta get your money first." Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. I want to go there so bad. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 16 sickles an ounce. They're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Elope's Owl Emporium, Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown, and Snowy." Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed against the window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000. Fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spellbooks, quills, and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over the other building shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was... "Yep, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white stone steps toward him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and, Harry noticed, very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek, beneath our floors, a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad trying to rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Mornin'," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe." "You have his key, sir?" Got it somewhere here, said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right, weighing a pile of rubies, as big as glowing coals. Got it, said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. That seems to be an order. Ah, I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore, said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. It's about the you-know-what in the Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. Very well, he said, handing it back to Hagrid. I'll have someone take you down to both vaults. Griffook. Griffook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back into his pockets, he and Harry followed Griffook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? Harry asked. Can tell you that, said Hagrid mysteriously. Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. More than my job's worth to tell you that. Griffook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and there was little railway tracks on the floor. Griffook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks toward them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. At first, they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, middle, fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way, because Griffook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and floor. I never know, Harry called to Hagrid over all the noise of the cart. What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite? Stalagmite's got an M in it, said Hagrid, and don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm gonna be sick. It did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees from trembling. Griffook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. All yours, smiled Hagrid. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep, and all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him, buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. The gold ones are galleons, he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon, and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough. Is it though? Right, that should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for ya. He turned to Griffook. Vault 730 now. Vault 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly? One speed only, said Griffook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. Stand back, said Griffook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers. And it simply melted away. If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there, said Griffook. How often do you check to see if anyone's inside? Harry asked. About once every 10 years, said Griffook, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least. but at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. Okay, I think we've been reading for a long time, and I can see that your eyes are so heavy. They're so heavy. Your eyes are so heavy. So I think it's best if we go to sleep. And we're right at like a little mid-chapter break. And it's quite long still.